So that debate was absolute shit. What are the takeaways? Getting text here. Buttigieg is a shit-lipped yuppie. Let's start there. I mean, Bernie clearly asked him a rhetorical question. Like, it was not meant as a serious posed question. Pete's like, I'd like to address the question that this... I'm doing a Bernie impression. I don't know why. It's like, I'd like to address... Is that a good Pete? I'd like to address the question that Senator Sanders... And he would just talk during other people's... Like, when he wasn't called upon. They weren't calling upon him, though. I can't fault him too much for trying to get his voice in there. But, oh my god, Pete doesn't say anything when he talks. It's a lot of empty platitudes, and I'd like to think that he's like a progressive in moderate clothing, but he looks like a nothing in a nothing suit. He's just like he speaks vaguely about morality and like the desire for unity in the nation, and I'm like, yeah, okay, how you gonna do that? Like, by making an even more convoluted version of healthcare, Medicare for all who want it. Like, one of the good things about single payer is it's just simple. It's a simple thing. You know, the money comes out of your paycheck. It's less than an insurance premium. No deductibles. No copays. You go to the doctor when you're sick. You get things taken care of. One thing I do not agree with Bernie on, and there's very few things I do not agree with Bernie on, it's the total elimination of private care, because that is a tough sell on the American people. Now, I think the American people are fucking stupid for, like, if, as the pundits would have us believe, they're so in love with their current health plans, and the whole argument about how unions fought for those plans. So, like, yeah, they negotiated, right? So if somebody negotiates their rape down from a gangbang to a one-on-one, does that mean that we should allow them to get raped because they put all the effort in the negotiation? No, it's a rape. And, like, that's what the healthcare companies do to us, like, in this nation, by just, like, they take your money, and then they can deny you care based on essentially arbitrary criteria. So why do I support still having private health insurance? Because the choice should be available. If people want to be stupid and they want to pay more for worse care, then I suppose they should be able to have the opportunity to do so. But also the existence of a public option would be good competition that would drive prices down, and it would drive quality up. That's how competition works. Like, I'm not a capitalist to my core, like Elizabeth Warren says, but I am a capitalist. I understand that competition is how you get the best possible outcomes. I suppose the issue here is how do we define capitalism in the modern world? It used to be about, like, you find a niche, and then if you do it better than anybody else, then you succeed. And then that was it, right? You know, I make a better pair of pants than he does, therefore I get more business. That's capitalism. Nowadays, capitalism is just about rampant exploitation and a race to the bottom, and that's why I'm extremely pro Bernie, because his core message, even if I may disagree on some policy positions, at the core, it is the recognition, which the Democratic elites have not recognized. It's why they're so flabbergasted by Bernie's success. But Bernie's success, in my eyes, is founded on his recognition of the problems, the systemic problems that are creating an environment that reward bad behavior, that reward exploitation of workers and resources, that reward keeping like poisons in certain products and foods because it's cost effective. That's the crux of the issue, is, like, it's the system itself. Like, it's one of the things that I wish Andrew Yang was still on these stages. The American people are fucking stupid for not giving Yang the support that he needed, because he is the president we need now more than ever. He's a data guy. He's not an ideologue. He's an ideas guy. He doesn't care about adhering to some kind of ideological purity test to make sure that he checks all the boxes. He's an ideas guy. It's like, here's what the data says. Here's what I think is going to help. That's it. And that's exactly what this country needs, because we're in a time of crisis right now in more than one way. The suicides, the depression, the standard of living going down, the life expectancy going down, all this shit with quantitative easing, basically propping up the stock market with a stick. And that stick's just like bowing under the weight. And the question is it all going to collapse before or after the election? So I got sidetracked there. Right. Let's go back to the debate. I think Bloomberg did himself some favors tonight. If what he said is true, I'm not fact checking any of this, but that he did release the women from the NDAs and nothing's come out about that so far. If truly the reason, it seems a little far fetched that people would need to sign NDAs over a comment, a sexual comment, or a derogatory, whatever it was. I think it's a fair point that he made that throughout. This is an old guy. He's been at this a long time. That there's so few instances over his lifetime that they can point to with this type of character problems with people that he worked with. Maybe there are more out there. I don't know, but they haven't come out. So if there were a lot, you'd know about more by now. Now that's not to say I like Bloomberg. He's a fucking Republican. If the fucking audience tonight, what was that about? Just shrieking at Bernie. And then disagreeing when he's saying that, we need to be able to call a duck, and sometimes a duck is a horrible authoritarian regime doing something right. It's a little ridiculous to suggest that because something is overall objectively bad, that they've never done anything good during that time. It's an objective fact that literacy is better in Cuba because of Fidel Castro. You can't say that didn't happen. And so it's not an overarching narrative on his whole tenure as the leader of Cuba, dictator, if we want to be specific. I'm sure people bitching all about the words I use. I don't give a shit. It's about ideas. If you worry about words, go back to fucking high school and just, get your nose in a book and maybe you'll learn that words are only as good as what they mean. What people are trying to get across to you. If you're so worried about the noises coming out of my face and not the intent of what I'm saying, then you don't belong in a political discussion because you have a very juvenile way of thinking about discourse. But back to the crowd, there had to have been some kind of shady shit getting that type of fucking Bloomberg support in there. Maybe not. Maybe they just opened it up to anybody and a bunch of Republicans came. It sounded like a lot. It sounded like a lot of fucking people in there cheering for Bloomberg, and a lot of people shrieking at Bernie for saying, Bernie didn't have a good night. But I don't think anybody but Steyer and Bloomberg had a good night. It was not a good night for anybody. I think Klobuchar was status quo. Pete just looked like a petulant little bitch, and he was just he just couldn't help himself but try and talk during other people's time. And just draw attention to himself. Like I said, hard to fault him because he really wasn't getting that much attention, which he shouldn't though. If he truly believes things that would resonate with voters like me, he doesn't show that, and that's his biggest failing. Is he's coming off as the corporatist, neoliberal status quo. That's what he comes off as, and if he doesn't recognize that, then either he's stupid or he's in denial. That's how he comes off. Now, let's get back on track here. The debate. See, what moments stood out? Warren still playing the identity politics game. She's not great on the debate stage. I feel like she would be an excellent supportive role, but she is not a figurehead. And that just shows in every debate when she starts out with ideas that sound really good, and then it kind of devolves into empty platitudes. And see, who else was even up there? Yeah, I think Biden is he's been better the last two debates, but he isn't helping himself either. Klobuchar, Biden, status quo. Pete, I mean, I didn't see anything from him tonight that was worth respecting. It was he had a chance to show something really genuine, and he almost did. And he drew attention to the fact that he's so measured. And speaking of which, that was, I thought, Tulsi Gabbard's greatest failing, was how measured she was. It was her greatest strength and her greatest weakness, was that she came off rather wooden in these debates, because she would give up the empty sounding platitudes too. Like, behind her though, there was real policy behind her. You could look that shit up. You could hear her talk, and it's the format of these debates is just disgusting. Like, all right, we've got an economic crisis, a climate crisis, a drug crisis, and a disease crisis on the horizon. We've got authoritarian dictatorships around the world trying to undermine our elections, trying to seek nuclear arms. And we've got countries in the Middle East at each other's throats. You have 2 minutes. What the fuck are we doing with these debates? I think it should be just like, instead of debates, they should just have every candidate do 3 hours on Joe Rogan, and that's it. And that's all. And then you just play those clips on loop all throughout the primary and let them do their stump speeches or whatever. But like, that is the real test, I think, of a real honest person. Because, if you don't like Joe Rogan, that's fine. Everyone's entitled to their opinion. But one thing you cannot deny is that Joe Rogan is a good bullshit sniffer. Like, he it depends on his guest. Like let's not get into Joe Rogan. Like, it's if there is substance, Joe Rogan can find it. But these debates, there's people talking over each other, jockeying for as much time as they can get, and then just as somebody starts getting rolling on like some real substantive, a real vein, a train of thought worth exploring, they start, so thank you, we need to move on, thank you, and then they go quiet for a second. It's like, okay, he's talking, he's gonna wrap it up, and then it sounds like he's gonna wrap it up, but then he doesn't, and then you get another full head of steam and start throwing in all the empty platitudes there before the time's up. And it's like, thank you, we need to go on. And then Mayor Pete starts fucking talking over here. It's like, no one talked to you, Pete. Shut the fuck up. And then Biden's there. At least Biden is probably the most civil out of all of them. He's just standing there, just tapping his fingers on the podium, waiting to be addressed. He's comfortable up there. That's the least you can say about him. Yeah, Bernie had a tough night. I think the crowd was against him. It's hard to have a good night when the people listening to you it seemed like they came in with a bias. Like they weren't going to hear Bernie out no matter what he had to say. But it's kind of hard for people who aren't on Bernie's side already. It's kind of hard to see how they would come around, because Bernie's been saying the same shit for decades. Like, as if people are going to hear what he's had to say for the first time and then change their minds all of a sudden. I don't think that's going to happen. But I think it's still clear that he's the front runner for the nomination. If they steal the nomination from him, I believe that there will be violence. That is not a threat of any kind. It's not a plan. But I believe if they steal a nomination from him, that is a true indication that democracy may very well be dead in this country. We've had two presidents two presidents who have lost the popular vote and then gone on to be elected. And then we were having this just blatant rigging of the primary against Bernie twice in a row. If you think that that's faulty, do some research. I'm not going to do it for you. Look it up. And if there is violence, I think it is fully justified, because that is what you do when the power is being taken away from the people, when the government is being wholly controlled and by the elites already in power, doing everything they can to secure their place and not allow any type of disruption to their cash flow, their war profiteering, their warmongering, their corporatist agenda. If they steal this nomination from Bernie with a contested convention, then it's going to be beyond rational denial. Let's see what we got. Yeah, Bloomberg leveraging 9/11. Yeah, that's text saying, yeah, he brought up 9/11. It wasn't too much. It was kind of cheap the way he brought it. As I stood on the ashes of the Twin Towers, whatever he said. Like, yeah, you aren't pulling at anyone's heartstrings, bro. It's everyone who watched this debate is now dumber. Like, look up that Adam Sandler bit, because that is so apt for the whole debate. Everyone's just contradicting each other. Everyone's saying, no, that's not true. No, this isn't true. Anyone who took something away from this debate who didn't already know the issues and where these people stood, they're fucking dumber. They don't know anything more than they did going in that they do coming out. Did I get that right? Whatever. It was just like, it was a chaos of information. Whether it's factual or not remains to be seen. I am personally concerned about Bernie's plan to pay for all of this stuff. If he doesn't come up with something definitive, I think that could really, really hurt him, either for the rest of the primary or in the general. That being said, we spend almost $1 trillion a year on war. I think we can spend a few billion on whatever the fuck we want, to be honest. Student loan forgiveness, like, we could have paid for that with Trump's tax cut. Like, we could have just done it overnight. And if you're against student loan forgiveness, I think you're just an asshole. There's no good reason to be against that. It's like, oh, I worked hard and I did the right thing. Good for you. Sorry, tough break. We got to think about the health of the society, and it is not a healthy society when millions of students are coming out with a mortgage, unable to pursue entrepreneurship, unable to take risks because they, if they fail, what do they have to fall back on? They can't file bankruptcy on a degree that was worthless. The student loans are foisted on teenagers before they understand how the world works, indoctrinated by their teachers, by their counselors, by society at large, by their parents, that you need to go to college, and to go to a good college, because you can't go to community college. You can't learn anything there. You need to go to a good college and get student loans to go to a good college, and then when you come out, you get a good job. And that's just not fucking true. You need to be, you need to know exactly what you want to do going into college to get what you want out of it. Otherwise, you are wasting your money. I don't support Bernie's college for all. That's one of the reasons I really, really love the universal basic income, because you just give people the money, and if they want to use it to go to college, they're more than welcome to. That is a great solution. But then it doesn't pay for idiots to go and fail out that would have been footed by the tax dollars. And it doesn't pay for, the wealthy kids, as they say. But mostly it's just like, because college, we know that college is no guarantee of success. Now, should anybody, regardless of their means, have access to higher education? Of course. But college, I don't think, is the right way anymore. You can learn anything you want on the internet, and I think that's something that really needs to be addressed going forward. I think Andrew Yang might have touched on it if he'd stuck around long enough, is the transformational nature of the information age. We've had the internet here for almost 30 years. I'm not quite sure when it started, and we're still thinking of education as something that needs to take place in a classroom with a person up front, and then like people, twiddling their fingers and drawing pictures in their notebooks that aren't really interesting. That's what education has to be. It's like, no, it doesn't. You can learn anything you want online. And so, but the reason that you go to the schools is because you get that piece of paper, that gold leaf that you hang up or put away, and it collects dust. And it's not even worth the dust that's collecting on it, because at least there's life inside the dust mites and shit. There's no life in that fucking piece of paper that's in that frame. Getting off the rails here. Anyway, the universal basic income is something that I think would have been just a great thing to have for this country. I think whoever the next president is going to have a hell of a time though, because the way that these markets are just like teetering on the edge of collapse, it's really something to be marveled at. I don't know how it's staying afloat as it is. So, who's the most likely to beat Donald Trump? I still think it's Bernie Sanders. I think Andrew Yang would have won in a landslide. I don't think it would have been close. Because I don't think Donald Trump would have debated Andrew Yang. He would not have gotten up on a debate stage. Because one, Yang, he's got kind of, I don't want to say this in a negative connotation. He's got kind of like a frat bro type of way about him, where he's like, he's got like this sense, funny sense of humor, right? He's a little snarky, a little, it's kind of should be wearing like polos and boat shoes, you know what I mean? But he's not that guy at heart, but he's got like that kind of, frat boy swagger without the date rape. He's, and I think that is a perfect, like force to go up against the pure, I don't even know what to call Donald Trump's nature. Just like narcissistic, unself-aware, just like word vomit of nonsense. Andrew Yang would have obliterated him in a one-on-one debate talking about substantive issues. It wouldn't, like, Trump would have been totally fucking embarrassed. I don't think they would have debated. But America is absolutely fucking stupid for letting this opportunity for Andrew Yang to lead the country into the future and not talk about returning to things, returning to civility, because we didn't have any problems before Trump, right? Like, everything bad in this country started with Donald Trump. There was no underlying reason why millions of people voted for him rather than the status quo with Hillary Clinton. It's really quite sad. The number one thing that really disillusioned me from getting too invested in the outcomes of politics is that people will disappoint you every time. And people that claim to be passionate about something put in no effort to learn about it. They just believe what they believe, and that's good enough. There's no reason to grow or change or rethink, your thought process. It's something I personally struggle with because I take that to extremes to the point that I have a hard time being passionate about something because I can see multiple sides. There's no two sides to everything. There is an indefinite amount of sides to anything. You can look at things from angles, and then once you think you've got every angle covered, you can talk to somebody who thinks differently than you and reframe the entire thing. I don't know how many times in my life I've been so sure of something and had my mind changed because of a simple conversation. A conversation that left me angry because I had a point and I was proven wrong, and then I was better because I changed because of it. And there's nothing wrong with being wrong. That's something that we are failing to teach people. It's staying wrong that's the problem. It's denying facts once they're in your face. You need to integrate them, not disregard them. And so that's one of the things that made this debate so tough is who's even telling the truth anymore? I believe Bernie when he says what he says. I believe him. Warren, I don't know what she believes. She really was a superstar in the making for a little bit there, and she kind of gave it up to take this identity politic, right to the right side of Bernie Sanders rather than being a real progressive figurehead. It's a tough thing to ask from anybody, but if you aren't willing to stick your neck out and be a real figure for something truly revolutionary, then don't pass yourself off as that at the start. Pete, once again, don't know what the fuck he stands for. He calls being criticized over taking bribes from billionaires a purity test. I mean, I don't know what to make of that. Bloomberg's a Republican. Why are we even talking about him? Steyer, I like Steyer. I like him. He seems like a very genuine person. He also seems like a very like goal oriented person. Like he has like real. Okay, let's talk about reparations. That was a good segue. Um, I'm definitely for the spirit of reparations because let's just think about how long ago slavery ended. It was the 1800s. That's two grandmas ago. Your grandma's grandma was alive while people were shooting each other to free or keep slaves. Your grandma's grandma. And I do think that there is a complete lack of appreciation or perspective on just how far we've come in such a short amount of time. People alive today remember when it was on the TV of black Americans having dogs sent on them, being sprayed with fire hoses. That was 1960s. 60 years ago, not even 50 some years ago, that we saw Martin Luther King assassinated because he dared to think that all people should be equal before the law and have equal dignity in American society. We've come a long way in a very short amount of time, but at the same time, we're living with a legacy of racism, and of course, there are a number of groups that can claim a history of racism, particularly Italians, and the Irish had a rough go of it here in the 20th century. But it wasn't a systemic, ingrained into law, drawing lines specifically to segregate white and black neighborhoods. Those lines still exist today, and they still disenfranchise thousands, possibly millions. I don't have the numbers of black Americans who could have had it so much better if they just had the good fortune to be born somewhere else. Just like born in another town or just another part of town. But because, their parents were born in this particular slum and their parents' parents, and this is what a legacy of slavery looks like. This is what the legacy of Jim Crow looks like, is you disadvantage a group institutionally, systemically, on a very large scale for a very long time. And it doesn't just get better all of a sudden. It just doesn't happen like that. Now, yeah. Now, what is the best form of reparations? What does Tom Steyer really mean? Is he talking about straight cash? How do you divvy it up? Do you just send every black American cash because they're in a country with this history of racism? So if somebody, say, was, literally born in Nigeria and they got here last month, are they entitled to reparations? What is the test for it? Cash might be the answer. I doubt it, because cash doesn't fix systemic problems. To me, the best thing that we can do for any person of a historically oppressed group is to create a society where that none of that has any impact on your ability to live your life and to live a fulfilling life and to be who you are. And that goes for everybody, not just oppressed groups. I've been driven away from the Democratic Party because of this move towards intersectional feminism, where accidents of birth are more important than what's inside. That is the literal definition of bigotry, what they supposedly fight against. And some of you can be like, oh, poor straight white guy, oh, things are so hard on you. I'm not saying things are hard on me. I'm saying this type of thinking is toxic. That's what I've always fought against, is types of thinking. It's not necessarily how they manifest. It's like, where's it going? And the intersectional people, it's a dead end, and it does nothing but divide people. And that's the last thing you want to do, is divide people, you know? Anyway, I've been on my soapbox long enough. Go ahead and leave a comment. I won't read them. It's not because I'm like afraid of what people might say. It's because I don't care what you have to say. I don't care. I don't know you. I don't have any reason to believe that someone has something worth hearing down there. None of you have any credibility. You know, I know I said that, like, I focus really hard on like self-assessment and like challenging myself, but I prefer to do that face to face, where the person is forced to deal with you as a human being and not as an image on a screen where there's no repercussions if you're going to be a dickhead about it. And two, I can't. It's harder for me to misinterpret what you're saying. And I just, like, I have a problem. Like, I can't let things go. So if I read a comment I don't like, I'm going to be like refreshing and replying and wasting my fucking life interacting with somebody that I don't need to be talking to. So anyway, the debate was a disaster. Pete sucks. Bloomberg sucks. Warren could have been great, but she's not great. 4 out of 10. I do like Klobuchar. I like her. I guess I didn't talk about her at all, except for the status quo. But, like, who needs to talk about Amy Klobuchar? Anyway, thanks for spending your time here. I hope that at the least I gave you some things to think about. And if you disagree with anything I said, then that's fine. Just ask yourself the question, why? Do I disagree with this because it made me feel bad? And then ask yourself, did it make me feel bad because it was wrong? Or did it make me feel bad because I was wrong? Okay. Yang 2020. Way to go, computer. I like Windows.